Shalom, everyone. Good morning to you all. May it be a blessed morning to you, wherever you may be, in whatever time zone, even whatever day your calendar may say at this particular stage. We're here in Texas, where I live. This is a beautiful Shabbat morning, and it is a time I just wish to bless the world, bless you and your households and your family. May the Holy One be all around you for your protection, for your instruction, for your inspiration, for your empowerment, and for your guidance through the mission that is ahead of you today. Today we are at Parsha number 3 in the cycle. This is our time to discuss Parsha Lecha. Interesting Hebrew phrase, Lecha, very difficult to translate, has something to do with walking, has something to do with you, with the second person. You walk, go walk, start your walk, start on a journey. Go out for yourself, some say, or just go out, get out. There is a sense of imminent need to get off of our status quo and begin to step into another higher level of realm and responsibility and adventure. So that's what Lech Lecha means in general. As far as where we are, the address in the Torah for this study will be Genesis chapter 12, verse 1 through Genesis chapter 17 and verse 27. Come along, let's go on this journey, this great adventure that the Creator of the universe has designed for His people to follow generation after generation until He comes. So I call this particular Parsha study that we're going to talk about today, the name that I feel that most appropriately describes it to me is implementing phase 2 of the strategic initiative to redeem mankind and restore creation to its Edenic state. Implementing phase 2 of that strategic initiative, and I call it specifically deploying the asset. Deploying the asset. Yes, beloved, man, woman, child, whoever may be listening to me, whoever hears the sound of this voice, you are the asset, and you are being deployed. It all is taken from the story of Genesis chapter 12 and this old 75-year-old sheep herder named Avram. And Avram lived in Haran, in upper Mesopotamia, north of the Euphrates River, in a village or town named after his own son. Perhaps, Terach, the father, had named the village after Haran. Haran was Avram's brother, and Haran had passed away. And so Avram is living at 75 years old, married to Sarai. She is barren. They've had no children. They've got a few sheep, perhaps. They're living in his father's household. He's living in a very pagan land. They worshiped the moon goddess. They worshipped all sorts of different types of beings. It was very naturalistic. They saw things and they saw patterns they didn't understand, so they called them gods. And this was the pattern of polytheism that was predominant throughout the world at the time, and specifically very powerful and very superstitious and very controlling and manipulative there in the upper Mesopotamian region where Avram and Sarai lived. Now this starts unbeknownst to Avram. He is the original, the prototype asset. And when we talk about this being the week of deploying the asset, we're going to see a pattern laid for us, as it happens in the lives of our patriarchs, you see, beloved. So it is a repeating pattern that takes place in ours, whether we are aware of it, cognizant of it or not, whether we are paying attention to it or not. The same patterns, the patterns are established and they repeat themselves over and over again in our lives. We as descendants, the seed, either through the biological methodology of seed reformation or through the engrafting process. As seed of Abraham, we become the asset. And we also are called to a time of deployment, a season of deployment, and a mission that comes with the deployment we're sent on. So this is what we'll be talking about today. I pray that you'll be awake and alive and listening, and your ears will tune up, because this is not about an old story about an old man that happened a long time ago. This is our story. This is why we're here. This is what our life is really all about. And this is how we can find meaning and purpose in all the things that are going on, and why we have the breath of life and the heartbeat and the impulses of the brain that send out to and come back from the various different limbs and organs and nerve centers of our bodies. This is why we are here. Welcome to the strategic initiative of the Holy One. Welcome to you being called and known as the asset. This is the third week of the Torah cycle. We are just beginning, but boy, we've come a long way. And last week in Parsha Noach, we were introduced to this, I call it the nuclear option. The Holy One needs us to know, as we get ready to, as we spend a year and then a year after year, decade after decade in the Torah studies, he wants us to understand what the nuclear option looks like. When creation, he is the great ecosystem manager. He is the designer and the superintendent of the ecosystem of earth and heavens and the universe as we know it. And in that task, he has a responsibility to do what is necessary at every given moment to bring that ecosystem into its fruition and its purpose. And so we learned last week that he holds in reserve the nuclear option. That we use that term to describe the flood, the great flood that covered all the earth. All the highest mountain was covered by meter after meter. And so we see in this process that the Holy One holds that in reserve. Now he's going to actually, last week he promised he would not do that again. He would not engage the nuclear option to heal the world, to fix the world again, because he has another plan. He wants us to understand the option to the new plan. The option to the new plan is not good. It's good from the standpoint of the world, but it's not good from the standpoint of humanity as it exists in that day, the families and the bloodlines on the earth at that day. So he says, understand the possibility still exists for something similar to the nuclear option, but I have another plan, and the other plan is to deploy the asset. To deploy the assets throughout the earth, to deploy the assets of his covenant people who will simultaneously engage two things: the grace that Noah found in the eyes of the Holy One. Noah found grace in the eyes of the Holy One. And also employ simultaneously and embrace simultaneously the covenant protocols, the brit. And I will make a covenant with you and with your seed, the Holy One said. These two things go hand in hand. If you try to have a relationship with the Holy One based solely upon grace, you will not accomplish the strategic initiative of the Holy One. You may feel like you have a good relationship with him, but you won't do what you're put on the earth to do. Similarly, if you only choose to follow the covenant, if you only choose to follow covenant protocols and accountability responsibilities and take covenant privileges, and you don't incorporate the grace of the Holy One, then not only incorporate it, begin to exude it and share it with others. If you don't do that, again, you may have something you feel comfortable with or feel proud of in your own life, but you do not have the strategic initiative operative in your life. The world needs the strategic initiative. It needs the asset to deploy in both grace and covenant responsibility, love, mercy, kindness, and also the guidance of the Torah. So last week we learned about Noach, and we learned about the nuclear option. And this week we're going to learn about the better plan, the option to the option of the nuclear option. This week the spotlight of Torah is going to fall on Avram, a man from the 10th generation after Noach. Through the son of Noach called Shem, we're going to find a friend of God, the asset that is going to be deployed to prevent the necessity, hopefully, of there being a nuclear option in the future. So the stage is set. As we begin Parsha Lecha in Genesis 12, we see that the stage has been set for the next level of human participation in the Holy One's grand plan of redemption and restoration. The stage has been set for the next level of human participation in the Holy One's grand plan of redemption and restoration. Are you ready to take up the mantle? Are you ready to become the asset? Are you ready for your deployment? And are you ready for your mission declaration? And can you carry, in the midst of it all, can you carry the grace of the Holy One? Welcome, if you said yes, if you're willing to try, welcome to His Majesty's Special Forces. Welcome to His Majesty's Special Forces. And welcome to the higher protocols of grace-initiated and motivated covenant lifestyle. Welcome to the higher protocols of grace-instituted and motivated covenant lifestyle. This is what Abraham's life is all about. This is what his son Yitzhak's life will be all about. Isaac, as the world knows in the West. This is what his grandson Jacob, as he's known in the Western world, his life is all about. This is what Joseph's life and Judah's life and Joseph's life are all about. This is what the whole story of the Torah is. This is what the mission of Messiah is. This is about being part of His Majesty's Special Forces and accepting, embracing, and walking in the higher protocols of the grace-initiated and motivated covenant lifestyle. Why does the Holy One need to deploy special forces? Why this strategic initiative? Why does He just let it be? Let humanity just be humanity? Well, let me remind you what the Torah has told us. Even after the flood. After the flood in Genesis 8, chapter 21, I think it was, verse 21b, it says, the Yetzer, the focus, the formulations, the meditations, the inclinations, the Yetzer of man's heart is what? Is Ra, is evil, and we translate it in English, but it just means self-obsessed and destructive in its capacities from his youth. Let me just read that. This is the status of the world you live in. This is the state of the people to whom you're called, and within which you're called to deploy. This is your state as well, to the extent that you allow it to take over your life. Genesis 8, verse 12b. And this is how it says, the Yetzer, the focus, the formulation, the meditation, and the inclination of man's heart is Ra, from his youth. Do you understand what we're dealing with here? This is why the Holy One needs to deploy special forces. This is why our lives matter, because He has chosen to show the world a more excellent way, a better way. And then also in Genesis chapter 11, we see the story of the narrative of the tower. All men are unified in one thing. Again, being against God, being better than God's plan, having another way they like better, a fleshly, sensual, pseudo-intellectual, better way than the Holy One. We're smarter than, if there is a Creator, we think we're smarter than Him. We think what we feel, what we want, matters more than what He wants, what His will might be, or what His plan might be. So the people, in Genesis 11, it says, the people are achad, they are unified against the creation plan. And they all have one safa, they only have one sarcastic, cynical narrative. And that is what? This is what they began to do as the Holy One looked at the tower. He says, this is what the kind of thing they're going to do. Nothing that they, yazam, to Assad that they plan to build will be prevented from them unless we have a strategic initiative. So what the Holy One did, as you recall, was he dispersed the nations. He caused there to be a confusion of language, of speech, of way of thinking, worldview. It's not just about language, it's about worldview that goes with the language. It's why when we study the Hebrew, we find a different kind of a worldview based upon the fear of the Holy One, as opposed to when we study some other language like Greek or English or Spanish or Latin or whatever the case may be. And so that we find this strategic initiative being implemented before the asset is called. The strategic initiative is in, and people are dispersed, as He planned to do, all through the earth. At every hillside, valley, every island, people are dispersed there because they can't get along, and they form their own nation states, their own communities, they form their own ethnic groups, and their own like kind methodologies. Oh, and this is what the mission is. Gives us a chance to have the deployment the strategic initiative apply, because one by one we can infiltrate, and one by one we can begin to positively impact those ethnic groups, those nation states, those geographical regions, those group mentalities. And so the Holy One said at the end of the Holy One gave over. Let me read this. He poured over the language of all the earth, and from there he scattered, sowed like seed, the people abroad all over the face of the earth. That was the way it ended. That's what we deal with. That is our deployment conditions. Now, what is our mission? We'll find out in just a few minutes. Well, let me tell you just generally. Torah, the Creator's instruction manual for redeeming human life on planet Earth, is designed to train us to disarm and neutralize the post-fall destructive influences of the world. That's the Torah's job. That's why he chose to give us the Torah. It is not to get us to some form of nirvana or some form of heaven, or to make us to somehow escape this physical world and get into some spiritual dimension. It is designed to take this earth and begin to redeem humanity and redeem and restore the creation. So this is Torah's instruction manual. Torah is the instruction manual for how to do this. And in so doing, Torah teaches us to disarm and neutralize the post-fall destructive forces, which are, of course, Ra, which we usually translate as evil or wickedness, but doesn't really mean that in the sense we think of it. It means humanity going humanity's way in a very obnoxious, rebellious way against the Holy One. And the second thing, other than Ra, is shakat, which is corruptive activity. When you're not going along the right mission, you begin to pick up stuff you shouldn't pick up. You begin to be influenced and distracted by things you shouldn't be distracted by. You begin to be obsessed about things that you shouldn't be obsessed about because you're on the wrong way. That's Ra leads to shakat, the corruptive activity that lays waste and begins to take us down on death spirals, into addictions and addictive behaviors and toxic interactions and relationships and attitudes and mindsets. Well, we can see that. And the third thing, after Ra leads to shakat, shakat leads to Hamas. This is where it turns violent, it turns bloody, it turns really, really ugly. Narcissism takes charge, and we just take whatever. We say things that should belong to us. We accuse others of taking things that belong to us, and then we get angry about classes and ethnicity differences and inequalities and injustices. And this is where we begin to just get in the streets and do violent things. If we don't get in the streets physically and shed blood, as many do, if we don't do that, our mouths are the vessels, and our attitudes and our facial expressions and our behaviors show that we only care about ourselves and getting what we want. We like to talk truth to power as opposed to giving wisdom to the world. Well, it is time for us to choose to embrace our role as the asset in the King's vision and plan for fixing the world. So welcome to the grand adventures of the transcenders, of the faithful, of those who mix the blend of grace and covenant protocol. Great adventures in strategic, effective, and God-honoring counterculture pushback. These are the great adventures in strategic, effective, patient, God-honoring counterculture pushback. Well, and the word of the week, as I've kind of mentioned earlier, is yalak. It means to walk. Lecha is from this verb yalak. The whole portion is about learning how to walk. As we heard about Hanok, or Enoch as the world knows him, and earlier in Genesis we learned about Noah last week. The calling of man, of the Holy One upon our lives, is to walk, to do, not just to believe stuff, to think stuff, to pontificate about stuff, to preach, to walk in a certain way, a way that is on a deployment, on a mission, for a redemptive purpose. It's about how we impact the world. And you do that, you have to walk. Lecha! It should be speaking to your spirit right now. The creator of the universe is saying, do you even know what I put you on earth for? Are you ready to walk in that? Are you ready to take that first step? We've got a long way to go. It's going to be a good journey. So we're called on and sent on a pre-planned, divinely guided journey, an odyssey of great potential and beauty. I call it the Shulamite's Odyssey, that we are all called it. We're all the Shulamite, as it were, in the Song of Solomon. Remember how that all started. The Shulamite is crying out, draw me after you, and let us run together. That's the heart cry. Has he awakened the Shulamite's heart cry in you? Are you ready for him to draw you after him, to get you out of your status quo, to get you out of your bondages, to get you out of your limitations and your restrictions, like Avraham? Are you ready to let him draw you after him, and then run together with him? Well, the voice of the Holy One is responding, as he does to the Shulamite. The voice of the bridegroom cries out, rise up, get up, come on. Rise up, my love, my fair one, and come away. Well, this is the call of Avraham. This is the call of the asset. This is my call. This is your call. This is our purpose on earth at such a time as this. That being said, that introduction being laid, let us sing our call to worship, the Baraku. If you know it, please sing along with me. If not, just listen as the Hebrew words speak to and call and awaken your spirit. Baruch Adonai Hamvorach, Baruch Adonai Hamvorach, Leolam Vayed. Baruch Atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bakar banu mikol ha'amin, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah. And now with the Baraku being spoken and said, our spirits being awakened, may we pray. Open our eyes, O Holy One, that we may see wondrous things in your Torah, for we are but strangers in the earth. So do not hide your commandments from us. Last week we left off with the aftermath of the flood, the nuclear option as I've called it. In the aftermath of that, there were 4 surviving human couples, and they set out in accordance with grace and covenant to reestablish life on planet Earth. Again, men established lifestyles independent of the Holy One, however. It didn't take long. Ra led to Shachat, led to Hamas. And, of course, by the 3rd, 4th generation, they had built the Tower of Babel, and we see the dispersion had to take place. The Holy One now has divided mankind into nations and tribes and tongues, ethnicities, and ideologies, for that matter. And each one, primarily, if not exclusively, seeks its own interest. Hence, what we have is competition, prejudice, oppression, and nation rising against nation, people against people. This is what our conditions of deployment are. And in the 10th generation after the flood, we see that a descendant of Shem, who was Noah's son, one of 3 sons, the descendant of Shem named Terach himself had 3 sons. Nachor, Haran, and our hero, as we may say it, our father, our grandfather, as it may be, Avram. Nachor was one, Haran was the 2nd son, and Avram. And Terach, the father of these 3, left Ur of the Chaldees en route to the land of Canaan. The spotlight of Torah and now is ready to fall on Avram, the 3rd of these Who knows what the age, the respective ages were, or who was the oldest. But the one we mentioned third, Avram, is now going to get the spotlight of the Torah. He is the asset, and he is the prototype of all the assets that will follow. But he's not much to look at. I mean, from the standpoint of that, he's 75 years old. He's a sheep herder in Haran. He's not a superstar as the world would think of him. And the Holy One says that my assets are usually not superstars. My assets are, I make superstars. Avram could say that he had no opportunities. He had no chance in life because he was born in such a mess, and his father was torn by tragedy. As Haran, the older brother, died, and he even established a city. He stopped his journey to Canaan. He quit in midstream and buried Haran and set up a village in honor of him. And so Avram had no chance. He had no opportunity. He was a member of a lower class. He was not. And then we see that the Holy One says, I gave you a chance. No matter what you came from, no matter what ethnic group, what economic class, what situation, what home life you were born into, I give you a chance. Don't say you haven't been given a chance. Don't say you have no opportunity. You, 75 years old or whatever, age is not a qualification. Education is not a qualification. Class or race is not a qualification. You are the one I'm calling. And here we are today. So, at the age of 75 years, as Avram is raising flocks, he has his 65-year-old wife, Sarah, beautiful woman, barren. She is the epitome of the opposite of be fruitful and multiply. She can't do that. Avram is getting old. He's past his prime. And then there's the brother Nachor and the wife Milcah live there, and they're growing family, but they're watching this other family grow, and Avram is getting nothing. All he has living with him is his fatherless nephew, Lot. Haran's son, as I said, Haran died. He left a son, Lot. And so that's the only hope he has. And so we start our journey. Genesis 11. And I'll read to you a little in Hebrew, not because I'm trying to confuse you, because I want to speak to your spirit, not to your mind. I'll also follow up with English, a translation into English, so that you can stay in tune. Your spirit and your mind can stay in tune. So don't be offended or don't be caught off guard by the fact that we're going to start in Hebrew and then finish in English. This is the protocol, design protocol to call the asset. So it starts in this way. Va'amar Adonai el Avram Lech Lecha. English. Then the Holy One said to Avram, go out, walk, go on a journey, unto yourself. A lot packed in that Lech Lecha call. Lech Lecha is our calling. Lech Lecha is all calling. Go out of something. Get out of where you are. Walk. Get up. Get out. Break free of inertia and limitations. Go out for yourself. So he says what? What are we to go out from? Ma'artsecha umimi. I'm going to have to read my writing. Me'artsecha umimi moladtecha umibet avika. From your land, from your country, from your kinsmen, from your father's house. El haaretz asher areka, and to a land and to a country that I will show you. The Holy One speaking to Avram, to his asset. To go to a land, a country that I will show you. I'm not going to tell you where it is or how to get there. I want you to understand there's something waiting for you. And I will make and build and form and shape of you a great body of people, a great nation of people. Well, this is the Lech Lecha call. Go out from your land, your country, your kinsmen, and your father's house. Go to a land that I show you, that you have to be wondering about, that you have to know is a mystery to you at this stage. Go out to something you haven't seen yet, the unseen realm, and I will make of you a great body of people, a goy gadol. It goes on. More, the Holy One's call to Avram, the call to his asset goes on. And I will bless you and will make your name great. And and you will be a conduit, a vessel of blessing. Be'arbacha ve'arbarekeka. And those who bless you, I will bless from it. Ve'mikalelka aor. And those who degrade you, I will restrict and limit their influence. V'nivreka, and you will be a blessing. Bechakol mishkifot ha'arma, to every family on the earth. V'nivreka, and you will be a blessing. Bechakol mishkifot ha'arma, to every family on the earth. That is our calling. That is the strategic initiative. That we would, instead of engaging in waiting for the right moment for the nuclear option next time, that this time what's going to happen is, though man is still just as bad as he ever was, the fall has taken just as much a toll after the flood as it was before the flood. Though this is the case, the Holy One's going to say, I'm going to send you out. I am going to send you forth. And you are to be a blessing to every family, in every place, in every geographical location, in every ethnicity, in every economic class. Not to one group or another. You're not taking sides. You're to be a blessing to every family on the earth. So the Holy One has just introduced himself and his wild, crazy, it seems to us, plan to Avram? I mean, why not choose a king? Why not choose a great, powerful athlete or some sort of a public figure? He's just a sheep herder on the backside of nowhere in the sleepy village of Haran in Mesopotamia. He has nothing to commend himself to the world. Why would he be the asset? Well, we're going to see that the Holy One is going to take Avram and he's going to put him before kings. He's going to put him in situations where they need a touch from the heavenly realm, a touch of grace mixed with covenant blended with grace. This is what's going to happen. The earth is about to experience the most dramatic atmosphere shift since the flood. And this repeats itself every time another person is born into or adopts and engrafted into the covenant and begins to follow Mashiach and follow the ways of the father, Avraham. The earth is about to experience the most dramatic atmospheric shift it's seen since the flood. And this time the medium of transformation is not going to be floodwater. It will be people with a vision and with an awakened heart and a firm commitment to covenant. So in this sleepy little village on the backside of nowhere, it all starts. The old sheep herder, Avram, has an encounter with the creator of the universe. And what that old sheep herder sees and hears in the course of that encounter, and of course how he chooses to respond, will indeed change the world forever. We are still talking about it today, thousands of years later. We will be talking about it forever. So the Holy One has introduced himself and his plan to Avram. Now there's a point at which he's going to say in Isaiah 41 verse 8, he's going to talk about the calling of his servant, the deployment of his asset. He's going to say, you Israel, my servant. This is a voice of the Holy One through prophet Yeshayahu, known to the Western world as Isaiah. He's going to say, you Israel are my servant, my asset. Yaakov, whom I have chosen, the seed of Avram, who loved me. This is about the response. Some people say, who followed me or what? But the word in Hebrew is Avahav, who loved me. Avram, who loved me. This is what the call, this is the asset, this is the deployment strategy. To win the heart of Avram, not just to instruct him and tell him what to do. To win his passion, to win his energy, to awaken in him the desire to learn more about the Creator and more about the goodness of the Creator. You, Israel, are my servant. And you can take that through green grafting for yourself, but don't take away Israel's role. But you, Israel, are my servant. Yaakov, whom I have chosen, the seed of Avram, who loved me. Listen to the passion and the cry of the Creator's heart. Are you one of those who loves him? Are you like Avraham? Are you ready to take up that Avrahamic seed that is burned within you and love the Holy One and love him in the way the Holy One shows and receives love? Through his grace and through his covenant, through his law. The Lecha calling is step one in the grand plan. Now we're going to see that Abraham is just getting started. And that the call, the Lecha call, the call to be an asset, isn't a once and you're done, you're in there. This is like lifetime and actually generational, cross-generational, multi-generations, millennium generations. This is a long-term, a long game plan that the Holy One has. Lecha calling is step one. I hope you're feeling step one is hitting you right now. You have received a divine invitation to be his asset, to transcend. Now, to transcend means to go beyond an established limit or a ceiling. When people talk of glass ceilings, as if somehow that they are restricted, limited by virtue of their age, their gender, their ethnicity, or whatever. The Holy One, again, looks at you as he looked at Abraham and says, I'm giving you the opportunity. I'm giving you the pathway through the glass ceiling. Whatever your glass ceiling is, don't be blaming other people for it. You are given the ability through grace and the covenant to transcend. So to transcend means to go beyond an established limit or a ceiling. It means to pass the other runners on a track, for instance. If you've ever run a race and you were able to get out ahead of to pass them. Or even if you've been on the highway or the multi-lane streets, you're able to pass a vehicle. This is the idea of being a transcender, to go forward faster, different route, and be ahead of other people. Well, this is what he's calling us to do. We're supposed to be a model. We're supposed to be a leader. We're supposed to be the bell cow of the world. Not because we're going to be perfect, we won't, but because he will keep empowering and keep cleansing and washing us and showing us that the world is, you don't have to be perfect, but you do need to be moving in the right direction. So to transcend means to go beyond an established limit or ceiling. Transcend means to surpass. And to transcend in the context of the Lecha calling means to live independently of the ordinary framework of givens that prevail in your family, in your culture, in your era, and in your ethnicity, and in your gender. This is the key. Don't be limited by thinking you're this or you're that. Who you are is an asset of the kingdom of heaven. And you are called, irrespective of all those things that divide you, which were given to make the plan work and have a basis for us to be able to get to you. Once we get to you, I say that we, being the assets of the Holy One, get to you, and you begin to get caught up in the love of the Holy One and his desire to walk in his grace and his covenant, then you have to learn to live independently of the ordinary framework of givens, the values, the priorities, the flesh cravings, the pseudo-intellectual musings and theories and ideas and ideologies of the fallen man. The things that prevail in your family, the things that prevail in your household, in your culture, and your kinsmen, and the things that prevail in your era and your time. Lecha, go out. Let's walk together. Let's take this journey together. Go out and find who you are for yourself. Lecha is man's invitation from the Holy One to transcend. Our story is not primarily going to be about where we came from. Well, as Abraham's, it's not going to be primarily about where he came from. Nor is it primarily about where we presently are even, and along the journey, or even who we think we are as a result, or what has happened to us in the course of our journey. What our story is primarily about is where we are going, that place that we have not seen, that place, that sense of belonging and deployment that we're being sent on. And also, our story is primarily about who we are fellowshipping and walking with. If we're primarily fellowshipping and walking with men and with cultures and with ethnicities and with genders and with what ideologies and with political movements, and if that's what we're doing, then we're not going to transcend. We're going to just get swallowed up by the greater whole. So our story is about who we are following and who we're walking with. We're walking with the Holy One. He is our guide. He is our leader. And then, of course, our story is about what our mission consists of. Oh, what a glorious mission it is. We're going to take chapters and chapters of Torah. We're going to take years and years to study to get a full clarification of what our mission is. But for right now, we know it's to have a cross-cultural and a cross-generational, a world-changing impact on the world, a redemptive plan, a restorative plan, something other than the nuclear option. And the only thing that is holding us back now is inertia, wanting a tendency of a body at rest to stay at rest, a lack of vision, a lack of seeing anything better than what we have right now, or seeing anything more valuable than the world's ideas, and its science, and its medicine, and its religion, and its philosophy, and its politics. Do we have a better vision than that? Well, most people don't. They get distracted and caught up in that. But we are called to have a higher vision. So we're called to overcome inertia, overcome the lack of vision, and then begin to shema the right voice as opposed to all the other voices, to listen to hear, to heed, to begin to flow in tune with, to get in rhythm with, and flow at meter with, and pace with the voice of the Creator of the universe, not the voice of human societies and its institutions and its angry mobs. Okay, so we have this strategic initiative of the Holy One. We are being called as the asset. We are being called to bring a redemptive effect and a restorative effect to all of our world. In the course of so doing, the world will have to choose. The people that we meet along our journey, wherever we may be at the time, have to make a choice. How will they respond to this new people, this new group? Will they kalal in Hebrew? Will they curse us? Will they resist us? Will they mock us? What will be their choice of response to our presence in their midst? We cannot fit in. We're not supposed to fit in. We're supposed to stand out, to stick out by virtue of the grace upon our life and the way in which we follow in covenant. And so this being the case, the world has to make a choice. And how they choose will make a determination. We'll fix, instead of being a nuclear option, they will receive what they sow. Whatever they sow into our lives, they will receive from the Holy One and from each other and from the world at large. If they sow anger and mocking and calling, cursing toward us, then they will be reaping a harvest of that. Or, on the other hand, if they sow blessing toward us, if they receive the blessing that we are offering them, the redemption, the restorative plan, and the mercy and the kindness, as well as the strategic protocols of how to live a well-lived life in this earth, if they receive that from us and they bless us for that, then they will receive the blessing multiple times. It'll be like a harvest. What they sow, they will reap. We are the dividing line for the nations. We will have an impact wherever we go, like Abraham did. So, Avram, our prototype, our first example of an asset from the Holy One's standpoint, takes a small entourage to the land of Canaan. That's where he winds up. He takes off, and he doesn't know where he's going, but he winds up in the land of Canaan. And when he gets there, he finds that pagans, just like those, much like those in Haran, in Mesopotamia, are firmly entrenched and in control in Canaan as well, and in Eretz Israel, as we'll later call it. There's not a lot of difference, and so our deployment is not to some wonderful group of people that is just all walking well and just want to hear the truth. Our deployment is always going to be amongst people who are primarily pagan, selfish, full of Ra, Shekat, and Hamas, full of folly and living according to flesh appetites and urges and pseudo-intellectual pursuits and institutional thinking. And they're going. This is who we're deployed to. This is why we're deployed, because the other way, would be the nuclear option. No, but he prefers to send us instead. Well, the pagans are firmly entrenched and in control, and they have no desire or inclination to leave the land of Canaan. So what Avram does, he pitches a tent. He just takes I'm here. He pitches his tent in a couple of places. He goes to Shechem. He goes to Beit El, close to Beit El, and he pitches his tent. And then he builds a couple of altars. He raises the stakes in response to visitations from the Holy One, to when the Holy One steps out of eternity into time and speaks to him or appears to him in certain cases. He does something in response. His heart, his love is building. His passion for the Holy One is building. And he wants to do something to set apart. So he builds up these altars. and presents olaot, and he calls upon the name of the Holy One. He begins to sanctify space within the region he's been sent to. This is, again, part of the calling of the asset. Would you build an altar? I'm not trying to tell you to do that. We only have one altar now under the Torah. This was the beginning of the process of learning the passion for the altar. But what we do need to do is sanctify space, make certain places safe places, places of refuge, places where the words of the Holy One are being taught, places where the words of the Holy One are being spoken about, places where the ways of the Holy One are being done. Sanctify spaces. Make it be at least your home. That's why he inscribe it on the doorposts of your house. Inscribe the Torah on the doorposts of your houses and on your gates. And this is the key of learning how to sanctify space. That's what Avram did. And one way to do it was through surrendering his life to the Holy One and rededicating his life there. Every day we should rededicate our lives to the Holy One and to his mission. And that's what the altar's life of Avram did. And then to call upon the one true God, the Holy One, to begin to not to preach in the sense of being pontificating and arrogant and rude and demanding and fear mongering, but to instead exhibit the relationship that the Holy One has designed us to have with him, this love relationship, the Shulamite's passion that we have by calling upon him and not following after the ways of the pagans around us, following after the priorities and the things that they like and love and get all caught up about, get angry about, get excited about. Well, that's the way in which Avram began to touch the world in which he lived. And that's the way in which the asset calling has been made upon our lives. All right. So the problem that he had was that with this paganism and this control freak methodology and the competitiveness that was in the land of the Canaanites, there was a famine in the land. The land was crying out. The land was screaming because the violence, the Hamas, the corruption, the shakat, the selfishness of the men there in Canaan. A famine was upon the land. This is what happens whenever there is no testimony of the kingdom. There's no goodness. There's no grace and covenant combined operative in the land. A famine was upon the land. Because the famine was on the land, Avram decided to go take his journey further, go further south, to go to Egypt, the breadbasket of the world at that time. But Egypt was full of Egyptians and pharaohs and soldiers and warriors and very lusty, and so in order to survive in Egypt, Avram realized he's going to have to do something. He doesn't know how to handle it, so he plays footloose and fancy free with the truth, and because speaking truth is our main priority. We want to do that in the course of things, but the idea is to exhibit wisdom and to bring about the blessing, not to speak truth to power, as so many people say it. That's one of the most dangerous things for the world that you can do. In order to survive in Egypt, Avram knew he had to do something crazy. And he played footloose and fancy free with the truth, particularly about his wife, Sarah. He said, Sarah, do me this favor, do me this blessing, show me your grace, and say you're my wife, my sister, not my wife. And so she does, and it works. The ruse works. Sarah gets taken into Pharaoh's harem, but she is never touched. Amazingly, this is the Holy One is proving to Avram his protective capacities. She's not even touched, although she is now in the harem of one of the most powerful men in the world. And the Holy One then strikes Egypt with a plague of barrenness throughout the land. And so this becomes such a strong plague that they don't understand it in Egypt. And so, again, it's part of the conditions. How you treat the people of the Holy One, the covenant people, how you choose to respond to them will choose what happens to you. They treated her in this way, and they get a plague. And so what's blamed? It gets blamed like superstition. Who are the newcomers? It gets blamed on the newcomers, Avram and Sarai. And in response, in a superstitious fit, the Egyptians send Avram out with money, with riches. It's kind of prototypical, very prototypical of the Egyptian bondage release that will take place under a later pharaoh. It's also predictive of what will happen in the latter days, but we will get to that another day. Avram is given riches beyond his imagination just to get out of town. And the little Hebrew entourage gets banished, kicked out, evicted, exiled from the pyramid land. And upon returning to Canaan with the riches of the Egyptians that have been showered upon him, Avram and Lot find that they're under-shepherds. Now, who are their under-shepherds? The under-shepherds don't get along. Who are the under-shepherds? These are the servants Pharaoh had given them in Egypt as a gift. What a gift. And so these under-shepherds are fighting and arguing, competing with one another. They don't like each other. They just can't get along. And so Avram and Lot decide they need to split up. And Lot chooses for his portion the lush Jordan Rift Valley, the place for the cities of the plains, where there's money, and there's transport, there's people, there's traffic, there's all sorts of caravans coming in and out, and wealth and lush tropical foliage is beautiful. And so he leaves Avram the more rural areas of Judea and Samaria as we know them now. They look almost like deserts in many cases. And so Avram takes that, and of course the Holy One begins to speak to him about taking authority, taking his asset abilities into those areas as well. But alas, things are not peaceful. The region gets embroiled in the first true world war. We've seen nations rising against nations, wars and rumors of wars. Well, this is the initials, this is the prototype of it. The region gets embroiled in the first ever true world war. Lot and his family get captured, get caught up in the middle of it. They were in the cities of the plain in the rich areas, and they get attacked and they get carried away along with all the wealth from Lot's new hometown, Sodom. It's not just Lot and his family get carried away. It's multitudes, thousands, taken by these strong world-class armies. It sounds like the end of days, doesn't it? Well, that's what happened. The beginning of days was like the end of days. The beginning of our mission and our calling to Lecha will be like the end of it. So here's Lot and his family and so many thousands of others, and all the property being taken by the kings of the east, and their mighty, massive armies. Avram begins to play the role of kinsman redeemer. He begins to step into a role that you couldn't have possibly imagined. A 75-year-old, now older than that, sheep herder from the backside of nowhere in Mesopotamia could play. He plays kinsman redeemer. And he and some Canaanite sheep herders along with him, and acquaintances he's met along the way, take on the greatest army in the world. It is an impossible situation. Against all odds, somehow, these few sheep herders managed to rescue Lot and his family and all the other captives and all the loot that had been taken by the raiding armies. He captured this all right from the strongest, the most powerful military force the world has ever seen, this World War confederacy of the kings of the East. And he brings all this stuff back to Canaan, and he gives it to the king of Sodom. And he brings back the captives, turns them loose, and walks away. He doesn't demand a thing from it. He didn't want that. He was a kinsman redeemer. He was not out for spoil. And so on his way back to his family, Avram is met and has wine and bread with a mysterious figure named Melchizedek. A mysterious place called Shalom, which will one day be called Yerushalayim, Jerusalem. And in this meeting, this chance meeting, it wasn't really chance at all, was it? Avram is strengthened by a blessing from Melchizedek. And Avram shares the wealth that he has received with Melchizedek. And there's a league, a union formed that will have its relevance manifested in later days. But as for right now, the asset meets the asset. And good things to take place. And then Abraham returns to what he might have expected to be a normal life. But instead of having a normal life back in his areas of Judea and Samaria where he's roaming and living, he has a crazy dream. And in that dream, the Holy One speaks to him again and he cuts covenant to breed with him in a higher level. And he tells him what the whole future holds for him and holds for Sarah and for the family that they don't even have yet. Sarah, meanwhile, she has been hearing all this stuff and seeing all these things take place and doesn't really mesh with her yet. The Holy One hasn't spoken to her yet. So she gets tired of waiting for the Holy One to open her womb in some way and to stir the loins of Avram, where the actual child conceiving process can take place. She gets tired of waiting, and she plays amateur human trafficker, unfortunately, like Avram did in Egypt. She does it with Hagar, the Egyptian. She sets up Avram with her faithful servant Hagar, who she got from Egypt. Despite Avram's age, Hagar somehow manages to get pregnant, and trouble immediately starts between her and Sarai. Hagar runs away. She runs out of water. An angel appears. The angel tells Hagar to go back to Sarah's tent, and meanwhile prophesies over Hagar, concerning the child that she's going to bear, calling Ishmael. Say he'd be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against every man against his, and he will live in face. He will be an irritant to all of his brethren. Well, years later, Avram will have another visitation from the Holy One. These are all prototypical. We all follow the same patterns. We go seasons, and in seasons we get different revelations and then progression upon those revelations as we walk with the Holy One. So 13 years after his first visitation, Avram has another visitation from the Holy One. And this time, the Holy One promises that a miracle child will be born to the barren wife, Sarai. And both Avram and Sarai get name upgrades. Avram becomes Avraham, and Sarai becomes Sarah. And the covenant that the Holy One cut with Avram a few years earlier is sealed with a sign. And this sign is going to be in the flesh of every child born beginning on the 8th day of the child's life. The male children, at least, are going to bear a sign in the covenant. Their flesh of their foreskin will be circumcised. And this will tell them from the day that they are the asset of the Creator of the universe, that they are not like other people, and their use of thought and speech and behavior and passion and energy is all designed to be used in a covenant way, because of the grace of the Holy One upon their lives. In anticipation of the promise of seed to be born to him in Avram and Sarah, Abraham decides to go ahead and circumcise himself, his 13-year-old son Ishmael through Hagar, and every male in the camp. And that's where our parsha will end this week. Now, I want to get you a little going away present from our discussion here, because we're about through. I've got to go next door, and we're going to have a wonderful time of fellowship with our folks here at the Biblical Lifestyle Center. But in the meantime, I want you to remember the call of Avram is your call. Lech, Lecha. Take a walk. Let's go on this great journey. Let the heart and the passion of the Shulamite for this great journey of faith arise in you today. Dedicate your heart and your life. You were made for something better. You were made for something, more impact. You are not bound by these glass ceilings and limitations that you think culture or ethnicity or gender or age or looks or athleticism levels or any other thing education might put on you. The Holy One says to you today, I release you from those restrictions, and I will empower you and send you. Be my asset. Get engaged in the mission. Carry my grace and follow my covenant. Shabbat Shalom. We'll see you next week.